first time I worked with Janet was 5 years ago, and it was on quite a small project. She just wanted somebody to come and film behind the scenes on her tour that she was doing in 2017. And Janet has always been, famously quite a private person, and that's what I found in the first few days. She was very private. She was busy. She had things going on. But then as time went on, in the first couple of weeks of working with her, she started to open up to me. And I think that's when I realized that actually there was something bigger there. It wasn't just a behind the scenes film of her tour. There was actually a feature documentary to be made here. Yeah, I at that moment I felt the project kind of evolving into something else. I remember calling my boss and saying, I've just done a fantastic interview with Janet. I think there's something bigger here that we could pursue. And that's really where it started. Going into the project, I certainly wasn't expecting Janet Jackson to want to, tell her life story and open up to me necessarily. That's not what I was expecting, but for some reason we found this bond, I think, where she felt she was comfortable enough to talk to me about, quite private and intimate things. And she was obviously just in that place in her life at that time. 6 months prior to me working with Janet, she just had her son. And it felt like she was in a kind of very reflective time in her life where she wanted to look back over, everything that had happened in her life. And I think, we were able to have quite a close bond because I'd also become a new parent, in that 6 month time period. And so we were able to kind of level to each other being new parents and relate to each other on those similar things. After the tour ended, things went quiet for a while. We took all the amazing footage that we had back to the UK, and we started to see what we could do with it. And I think the footage that we found we had was quite fascinating, and Janet was very, very open in it, and talking about all aspects of her life. And that's where we really started to develop the idea up into doing, a feature documentary. Over the next kind of 2 to 3 years, I would say, I kept filming with Janet on and off. More significant things were happening in her life, key moments in her life, and so we were trying to kind of document those things. And we kept asking her, would you be interested in doing your life story and telling your life story? And eventually we convinced her that, yes, she did want to tell her life story, and that's when we went into production with the documentary. I think there were certainly times over the kind of 4 or 5 years that we've been filming and producing this thing where we definitely thought it wasn't going to happen. But I think the pandemic was sort of a blessing in disguise because live music stopped. Janet wasn't able to go on the tours that she had planned. And so she had time to get involved with this documentary. And I think that is something that surprised me, just how much she did get involved in the documentary, kind of on a one-to-one basis with me. Yeah, it was a partnership, and it was kind of a great honor for me to be able to work with Janet on that one-to-one level. Not many people get that access to Janet, and so it was quite a privilege for me. I remember in the early days of filming with Janet Jackson in 2017, I got to go to her office in Los Angeles and into this room where her archives were kept. And it was fascinating. Like every single thing from over the years was in there, a room full of tapes and CDs and vinyl and everything, all of Janet's archives. And then there were costumes, there were photographs, there were books. And like within these 2 rooms, everything to do with Janet Jackson was in there. And you could literally pick any tape off the shelf, play it, and there would be something fascinating in there. And I think part of the appeal was that quite a lot of that footage had never seen the light of day before. And that was kind of very exciting to know that there was this wealth of footage and archival footage that we could work with. Janet's archive contains thousands of tapes. And so it took a long time for us to go through all those tapes and see what was on them and really cherry pick the best footage, and particularly the footage that hadn't been seen before. And so, I had a very talented team who, hardworking and talented team who were going through those tapes meticulously, looking for details that were key to the story that we wanted to tell. I can't wait for fans of Janet Jackson to see some of the footage that we've got in this documentary that has never been seen before, because it really gives you a real and honest portrayal of this woman who has been notoriously private all of her life. I think the thing that was quite surprising about, producing the documentary and asking people whether they would give an interview about Janet was just how many people wanted to be interviewed, how many people wanted to get involved, how many people wanted to tell, kind of great stories about Janet Jackson, including a lot of her family members, brothers, sisters, both her parents, and that was really special. I think over the course of filming the documentary, some quite big and sad kind of moments happened in Janet's life. But by that point in producing the documentary, I think Janet and I had this kind of bond where she was happy to talk to me about these things and be very open. And I think that comes across in the documentary. She doesn't shy away from talking about difficult experiences. She doesn't shy away from talking about sad events in her life. And I think that's a side of Janet that people have maybe never seen before. It's going to sound quite cliche, but I think Janet Jackson is famous for being in control of her life. And that's something that I definitely experienced in this documentary. The fact that I got to work with her on a one-on-one basis, and the fact that she's been so involved in producing this documentary. I think the one thing I have learned about her is she doesn't shy away from hard work. I think working with Janet, you'd expect that there would be a huge entourage around her, and you wouldn't necessarily be able to get access to her. But I think the one thing that people maybe don't know about Janet is she really is in control. She's meticulous in everything she does, and she doesn't shy away from hard work. And that's certainly been my experience working with her on this documentary. I think the biggest challenge in making this documentary is probably time. There's thousands and thousands of tapes in Janet's archives, and I'm sure there's probably moments that we've missed or moments that we would have loved to incorporate. But we're really pleased with what we've produced, and we've found some really fantastic moments that people will have never seen before. But who knows, if we'd had another year, maybe we could have made an even longer documentary. I hope when people watch this documentary, they go on the same kind of journey that I've been on directing this documentary. Everybody knows Janet Jackson is a superstar, but not everybody knows the journey that she's been on to get to the place in her life that she's in now. She's been through many ups and downs. She's been quite private about it up until now. But now I hope that people see that, she is real and she is honest and she is truly kind-hearted. She's not just a list of achievements for being a musician and entertainer. She's fought hard for everything in her life, whether that be her career or whether that be her personal life. And I hope that when people watch this documentary, they'll see and understand that. My name's Benjamin Hirsch, and I'm the director of the Janet Jackson documentary series. I really hope you enjoy the series. It's been fascinating to put together. She's opened up for the first time about a lot of pivotal moments in her life, and it's been a real privilege to kind of illustrate those stories with footage that has never been seen before. So I really hope you enjoy the film. Who is Janet Jackson?
She's done it all. She's a blueprint. She's a legend. There's a great deal of scrutiny that comes with having that last name.
Did the allegations affect you?
Guilty by association.
Justin is trying to contact us about you doing the Super Bowl.
It's a side that no one's ever seen.
ジャネット・ジャクソン、私のすべて。ヒストリーチャンネル。